The clock on the dashboard showed 9:45 p.m. when Officer Mike Rodriguez spotted the black man walking down Fifth Avenue. The street was quiet except for the soft hum of late evening traffic and the distant sound of a siren somewhere across the city. Rodriguez nudged his partner, Jake Williams, who was sipping coffee from a paper cup. "Look at that, Williams," Rodriguez said, pointing through the windshield. "Something doesn't look right about this guy." Marcus Thompson had just finished a long business meeting at the downtown office building. He was tired and looking forward to getting home to his family. His black suit was perfectly pressed, and his leather shoes clicked softly on the sidewalk as he walked toward his car. The silver Mercedes gleamed under the streetlights in a parking spot where he had left it 3 hours earlier. Williams squinted through the darkness and saw Marcus approaching the expensive car. "He's going for that Mercedes," Williams said with suspicion in his voice. "No way that belongs to him." The police car pulled up slowly behind Marcus just as he reached into his pocket for his keys. The blue and red lights started flashing, creating dancing shadows on the nearby buildings. Marcus stopped and turned around. He had been through this before. He knew exactly what was about to happen. Rodriguez stepped out of the car first. His hand rested on his belt near his weapon. "Hey you," he called out. "Stop right there and turn around slowly." Marcus did as he was told. He kept his hands visible and his movements calm and deliberate. "Good evening, officers," he said in a clear, steady voice. "Is there a problem?" Williams approached from the other side, circling around like they were cornering a dangerous animal. "We got reports of someone breaking into cars in this area," Williams lied smoothly. "You mind telling us what you're doing here?" "I just finished a business meeting," Marcus replied. "This is my car, and I was heading home." He slowly reached for his wallet, but Rodriguez immediately shouted for him to freeze. "Don't move your hands," Rodriguez barked. "Keep them where we can see them." Marcus raised his hands higher. "Officers, I'm just trying to get my identification. You can search me if you want, but this is my vehicle." Williams laughed. "Your vehicle," he repeated mockingly. "This car costs more than you probably make in 5 years. You expect us to believe you own this?" The words stung, but Marcus kept his composure. He had learned long ago that showing anger or frustration would only make things worse. "Yes, officer, it's registered in my name. Marcus Thompson. My registration is in the glove compartment." Rodriguez walked around the Mercedes, examining it closely. The car was immaculate, without a scratch or dent. It had all the latest features and custom rims that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "This doesn't add up," Rodriguez muttered. Williams stepped closer to Marcus. His breath smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes. "You know what I think," he said. "I think you found some keys on the ground and decided to try your luck. Car theft is a serious crime." Marcus felt his patience being tested, but he remained calm. "Officers, I understand your concern, but I can prove this car belongs to me. My business card is in my wallet. My insurance papers are in the glove box. Even my garage door opener is on the visor." Rodriguez and Williams exchanged glances. They had stopped black men before in this neighborhood, and usually the encounters ended with warnings or minor arrests. But this man was different. He spoke clearly. He was well-dressed. He didn't seem nervous or guilty. Williams decided to take a different approach. "Fine," he said. "Prove it. Open the car and show us the registration." Marcus carefully reached for his keys again. This time the officers let him. He unlocked the door and the car beeped softly. The interior lights came on, showing leather seats and a high-tech dashboard. Marcus opened the glove compartment and pulled out a folder containing his registration and insurance papers. Rodriguez snatched the papers and studied them under his flashlight. The documents clearly showed that Marcus Thompson owned the vehicle. Everything was legal and current, but instead of apologizing, the officers became more suspicious. "This could be fake," Williams said. "Anyone can print fake papers these days." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Officers, you can call in the license plate. You can verify everything through your computer system. I have nothing to hide." Rodriguez handed the papers back roughly. "We know how to do our job," he said sarcastically. "Don't tell us what to check." For the next 20 minutes, the officers put Marcus through a series of questions. They asked where he worked, where he lived, how he could afford such an expensive car. They made him prove he knew details about the vehicle that only the owner would know. Marcus answered every question patiently and thoroughly. Finally, Williams seemed satisfied, but he wasn't ready to let Marcus go without making his point clear. "You're lucky we're in a good mood tonight," he said. "Next time you're in this neighborhood, make sure you have all your paperwork ready. Some people might think a guy like you doesn't belong around here." Rodriguez stepped closer to Marcus. "And next time you want to file a complaint about us," he said with a smirk, "remember that nobody's going to believe your word over ours. We're the ones with badges." Marcus looked at both officers, carefully memorizing their face features and badge numbers. He knew better than to argue with them in the street. Instead, he simply nodded and said, "I understand, officers. Have a good evening." As Marcus drove away, he could see the police car in his rearview mirror still parked under the streetlight. Rodriguez and Williams were probably laughing about their encounter. They had no idea that their lives were about to change in ways they could never imagine. The incident was over, but the story was just beginning. Marcus Thompson wasn't just any successful businessman. He had a secret that would soon turn these officers' world upside down. But for tonight, he drove home quietly, planning his next moves carefully. The city lights blurred past his window as Marcus thought about what had just happened. He had been patient and respectful, but inside he was angry. Not just for himself, but for all the other innocent people who faced this kind of treatment every day. Soon things would be different. Very soon these officers would learn that badges don't make anyone untouchable. The Mercedes disappeared into the night, leaving behind two officers who thought they had won another small victory. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. The next morning came with gray clouds hanging low over the city. Officer Rodriguez sat at his desk in the precinct typing his incident report from the previous night. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he carefully chose his words. He wanted to make sure the story protected him and Williams from any potential complaints. Rodriguez typed slowly, using only 2 fingers on the keyboard. At approximately 21:45 hours, officers responded to reports of suspicious activity in the downtown area. Upon arrival, officers observed a male subject acting in a suspicious manner near multiple vehicles. Williams appeared at his shoulder, holding 2 cups of coffee. One was black and bitter, just the way Rodriguez liked it. "What are you writing?" Williams asked as he set the cup down on the cluttered desk. "Just covering our bases," Rodriguez replied without looking up from the computer screen. "You know how these people like to complain about everything." Williams pulled up a chair and read over his partner's shoulder. The report painted a very different picture from what had actually happened. In Rodriguez's version, Marcus had been acting suspiciously. He had become aggressive when questioned. He had refused to cooperate with their investigation. "Make sure you mention that he was uncooperative," Williams suggested. "And maybe add something about him raising his voice." Rodriguez nodded and continued typing. Subject became agitated when asked to provide identification. Subject raised his voice and displayed aggressive behavior toward officers. After thorough investigation, subject was released with a warning. The 2 officers read through the report together, making small changes here and there. They removed any mention of Marcus's expensive car. They left out the part about his business suit and professional appearance. They made no reference to his polite behavior or the fact that he had all the proper documentation. "This looks good," Rodriguez said as he printed the report. "No one's going to question this." Down the hall, Sergeant Paula Davis was organizing her paperwork for the morning briefing. She had been with the department for 15 years and had seen hundreds of reports just like the one Rodriguez was about to submit. Davis had learned not to ask too many questions about these incidents, especially when they involved certain officers. Rodriguez knocked on Davis's office door and entered without waiting for permission. "Morning, Sarge," he said cheerfully. "Got last night's report for you." Davis barely looked up from her coffee and stack of papers. "Any problems?" she asked in a bored voice. "Nothing we couldn't handle," Williams replied from the doorway. Just another guy who thought he could cause trouble in the wrong neighborhood. Davis glanced at the report, quickly scanning the key points. Her eyes moved over the words, but she wasn't really reading them. This was routine for her. She had built her career by not making waves and not questioning her officers too closely. The department valued loyalty above everything else. "Looks fine," Davis said, stamping the report with her approval. "File it with the others." Rodriguez and Williams walked back to their desks, feeling completely confident. They had done this dance many times before. Write a report that covered their actions, get their supervisor's quick approval, move on to the next day. The system protected them, and they knew it. The morning briefing started at 9 o'clock sharp. Captain Hayes stood at the front of the room reading from his notes about overnight incidents, crime statistics, traffic reports, budget updates. Nothing about the encounter with Marcus Thompson. Rodriguez and Williams sat in the back row making quiet jokes about the previous night. They mimicked Marcus's voice and laughed about his expensive car. Other officers nearby chuckled along, not knowing the full story but enjoying the entertainment. "After we checked his papers," Williams whispered Rodriguez, "and I should have searched that fancy car. Probably would have found something interesting." Rodriguez grinned. "Next time," he said. "There's always a next time with these people." But there wouldn't be a next time. Not for them anyway. At that very moment, Marcus Thompson was making phone calls that would change everything. He had spent years building relationships and earning respect in circles these officers knew nothing about. His patience during the traffic stop hadn't been fear or resignation. It had been strategy. Marcus had memorized both officers' badge numbers. He had noted their names from their uniforms. He had observed their patrol car number. Most importantly, he had remained calm enough to think clearly about his next moves. The precinct felt safe and familiar to Rodriguez and Williams. The coffee was strong. The jokes were funny. Their report was filed and approved. They had no reason to worry about some businessmen they had hassled the night before. Sergeant Davis locked the incident reports in her filing cabinet. She had processed dozens of similar complaints over the years. Most were dismissed after brief investigations. The few that weren't usually resulted in nothing more than verbal warnings or sensitivity training classes that everyone forgot about within a week. The entire police station operated like a well-oiled machine designed to protect its own. Officers looked out for each other. Supervisors trusted their people. The union backed everyone up. It was a brotherhood that outsiders couldn't penetrate or understand. Rodriguez and Williams changed into their uniforms for another day on patrol. They checked their equipment and reviewed their assigned routes. Everything seemed normal. Everything felt secure. They had their badges, their guns, and their authority. What more did they need? As they drove out of the parking lot, Rodriguez turned up the radio. "Another beautiful day in paradise," he said sarcastically. Williams laughed and adjusted his sunglasses. "These streets don't police themselves," he replied. Neither officer had any idea that their comfortable world was about to crumble. They had harassed the wrong person at the wrong time. Their badges had protected them for years, but that protection was about to disappear. The system they trusted so completely was about to turn against them. Marcus Thompson was already 3 steps ahead of them. While they were filing fake reports and making jokes, he was preparing to show them that nobody is truly untouchable. Not even police officers who think their badges give them unlimited power. The reckoning was coming, but Rodriguez and Williams didn't know it yet. They drove off into the morning thinking they had won again, when actually they had just sealed their own fate. Marcus Thompson stood in his home office looking out the large window at the city skyline. The morning sun cast long shadows across his desk, where several important documents lay spread out. His wife Sarah had already left for work, and the house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. The call connected after 2 rings, and a familiar voice answered. "Good morning, Commissioner Thompson. This is Mayor Johnson's office." "Good morning," Linda Marcus said calmly. "Is the mayor available for a brief call?" "I need to discuss the timeline for my announcement." "Of course, sir. Please hold while I transfer you." Marcus had been working toward this moment for months. The position of regional police commissioner had been offered to him after a nationwide search for the right candidate. He had the perfect combination of experience, education, and vision for police reform that the city desperately needed. The mayor's voice came through the phone, warm and professional. "Marcus, good to hear from you. I hope you're ready for next week's announcement. The city council is very excited about your appointment." "Actually, Sir," Marcus said carefully, "I'd like to move up the timeline. Something happened last night that makes me think we should announce my position sooner rather than later." Mayor Johnson was quiet for a moment. "Is everything all right, Marcus? You sound concerned." Marcus told the mayor about his encounter with officers Rodriguez and Williams. He described their behavior in detail and explained how they had filed a false report. The mayor listened without interrupting, growing more upset as the story continued. "This is exactly why we need you in that position," Mayor Johnson said angrily. "How soon can you start officially?" "I'm ready now," Marcus replied. "But I think we should keep the announcement quiet until I can assess the full situation. Give me a week to observe things from the inside before we go public." After ending the call with the mayor, Marcus made his second important phone call of the day. This one was to Captain Robert Hayes, who would become his direct subordinate once the transition was official. "Captain Hayes, this is Marcus Thompson. I believe you received some paperwork about my upcoming appointment as regional commissioner." "Yes, sir," Captain Hayes responded with surprise in his voice. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you until next week. Is there something I can help you with?" "I'd like to schedule a meeting with all district officers before my official announcement," Marcus said. "Something informal to observe and get a feel for the department culture." Captain Hayes agreed immediately. He had heard good things about Marcus Thompson's reputation for fairness and reform. The department needed strong leadership after years of complaints and bad publicity. Marcus spent the rest of the morning reviewing files about the precinct where Rodriguez and Williams worked. He had access to personnel records, complaint histories, and internal reports. What he found troubled him deeply. Rodriguez had 18 complaints filed against him in the past 3 years. Most had been dismissed after brief investigations. Williams had 15 complaints with a similar pattern of dismissals. Together, they had cost the city thousands of dollars in legal settlements. Sergeant Paula Davis, who had approved their report that morning, had her own questionable history. She had been accused of covering up misconduct cases and failing to properly supervise problematic officers. Yet she remained in her position year after year. Marcus also discovered that this precinct had the highest number of complaints for racial profiling in the entire city. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Young Black and Hispanic men were stopped, searched, and arrested at rates far higher than other demographics. The phone rang, interrupting his research. It was his friend and mentor, Chief Williams, from his former department in Chicago. Marcus had worked under him for 5 years before moving to accept this new position. "I heard through the grapevine that you're taking over that troubled district," Chief Williams said. "That's going to be a tough assignment, even for someone with your skills." Marcus told him about the previous night's incident. Chief Williams whistled low and long. "So you're going to be the boss of the guys who harassed you? That's some kind of justice right there." "It's not about revenge," Marcus said firmly. "It's about making real changes so this doesn't happen to other people. Too many good officers are getting dragged down by the bad ones." Chief Williams offered his support and promised to share some strategies that had worked in Chicago. After the call, Marcus felt more confident about the challenges ahead. In the afternoon, Marcus drove to City Hall for a meeting with the police union president. This conversation would be delicate since the union would likely resist many of his planned reforms. He needed to find a way to work with them, rather than against them. The union building was a modest 2-story structure near downtown. Marcus was surprised by how ordinary it looked from the outside. Inside, he met with President Frank Morrison, a veteran officer with 30 years of experience. Morrison was suspicious at first, but gradually warmed up as Marcus explained his vision for the department. He talked about supporting good officers while holding bad ones accountable. He emphasized training, community relations, and fair treatment for all officers and citizens. "I've heard you're fair," Morrison said finally. That's more than we can say about some of the other candidates who were considered for this job. As evening approached, Marcus returned home feeling both exhausted and energized. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he was ready for them. He had spent years preparing for this opportunity to lead positive change in law enforcement. Sarah arrived home from work and found Marcus in the kitchen making dinner. She could see the determination in his eyes and knew he was planning something important. "You're going to shake things up, aren't you?" she said with a knowing smile. Marcus nodded as he stirred the pasta sauce. Some people need to learn that badges are meant to protect citizens, not the officers who wear them. Neither Rodriguez nor Williams had any idea that their new boss was the man they had harassed just one night ago. They were about to discover that actions have consequences and that karma sometimes comes in the form of a new regional police commissioner who believes in justice for everyone. Captain Robert Hayes stood nervously in front of the assembled officers in the main briefing room. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare over the rows of uniformed men and women who had been called in for an emergency meeting. Nobody knew why they were there, and the speculation was running wild. Rodriguez and Williams sat in their usual spots near the back of the room. They were making quiet jokes about having to come in early on their day off. Williams had his feet up on the chair in front of him, acting like he owned the place. "I bet it's about budget cuts again," Rodriguez whispered. "They're probably going to tell us we have to share patrol cars or some other stupid policy." Williams nodded and yawned dramatically. "Whatever it is, it better be quick. I got tickets to the game tonight, and I'm not missing it for some boring meeting." Captain Hayes cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. The room slowly became quiet, but there was still an undercurrent of restless energy. Officers checked their phones and watches, wanting to get this over with. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Hayes began, his voice echoing in the large room. "I've called you here today to make an important announcement about our department leadership." A few officers groaned. Leadership changes usually meant more paperwork, more rules, and more hassles for everyone. Some of the older officers had been through dozens of these transitions over their careers. "We are getting a new regional police commissioner," Captain Hayes continued. "This change comes directly from the mayor's office and is effective immediately. I want everyone to give our new leader the respect and cooperation they deserve." Rodriguez rolled his eyes and made a face at Williams. "Here we go again," he muttered. "Another politician who's never walked a beat trying to tell us how to do our jobs." Captain Hayes gestured toward the door at the side of the room. "Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Marcus Thompson." The door opened and Marcus Thompson walked into the room wearing a crisp black uniform with the golden insignia of a regional commissioner. His presence was commanding and authoritative. He moved with confidence and purpose as he approached the front of the room. The color drained from Rodriguez's face so quickly that Williams thought his partner might faint. Williams looked at the new commissioner and felt his stomach drop to his feet. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of mistake or nightmare. Marcus scanned the room, making eye contact with various officers. When his gaze reached Rodriguez and Williams, he held it for just a moment longer than the others. His expression remained professional, but there was something in his eyes that made both officers sink lower in their chairs. "Thank you, Captain Hayes," Marcus said in a clear, strong voice. "I'm honored to serve as your new regional commissioner. I look forward to working with each and every one of you to make this department the best it can be." Several officers applauded politely. They had heard these kinds of speeches before from new leaders. Most promised change, but few actually delivered on those promises. "I come to this position with 20 years of experience in law enforcement," Marcus continued. "I started as a patrol officer just like many of you. I understand the challenges you face and the pressures you deal with every day." Rodriguez was sweating now despite the cool air conditioning. He kept looking around the room, hoping this was some kind of elaborate prank. Maybe someone would jump out and tell him it was all a joke. "I believe in accountability, transparency, and respect," Marcus said, letting his eyes find Rodriguez and Williams again. "Every citizen deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their race, background, or economic status." Williams felt like he might throw up. He remembered every word he had said to this man just 2 nights ago. Every insult, every threat, every moment of disrespect came flooding back to him. I also believe in supporting good officers, Marcus continued. Those who serve with honor and integrity will always have my backing, but those who abuse their authority or violate the public trust will face consequences. The room was completely silent now. Even the officers who had no idea what was happening could sense the tension in the air. Something important was taking place, but most of them didn't understand what it was. Marcus turned to face Rodriguez and Williams directly. I want to be clear about my expectations, he said. Professional conduct is not optional. Respect for all citizens is not optional. Honest reporting is not optional. Captain Hayes had noticed the strange behavior of Rodriguez and Williams. They looked like they had seen a ghost. He wondered what was wrong with them, but didn't want to interrupt the commissioner's speech. Over the coming weeks, Marcus said, I'll be meeting with each of you individually to discuss your roles and responsibilities. I want to hear your thoughts, ideas, and concerns about how we can better serve our community. Rodriguez tried to make himself invisible by slouching down in his chair. He couldn't believe this was happening. Of all the people in the world who could become their new boss, it had to be the man they had harassed and humiliated. Marcus concluded his remarks by saying, I look forward to working with all of you to build a department we can all be proud of. Thank you for your attention. As officers began filing out of the room, Rodriguez and Williams remained frozen in their seats. They watched as other officers approached the new commissioner to introduce themselves and shake his hand. Rodriguez finally found his voice. We're dead, he whispered to Williams. We're absolutely dead. Williams nodded, unable to speak. They both knew their comfortable world of unchecked authority was over. The man they had thought was just another citizen to push around was now their ultimate boss. Marcus finished greeting the other officers and then turned his attention back to Rodriguez and Williams. They were still sitting in the back of the room looking terrified. Officers Rodriguez and Williams, Marcus called out across the nearly empty room. I'd like to see both of you in my office tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp. We have some things to discuss. The two officers nodded weakly and stumbled out of the room. They knew their careers and possibly their freedom were now in the hands of the man they had wronged. Justice was coming, and there was nowhere left to hide. Rodriguez couldn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned in his bed, staring at the ceiling, while his wife snored softly beside him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marcus Thompson's face, looking at him with that calm, professional expression that somehow felt more threatening than any angry shout. Williams called him at 3 a.m. His voice was shaky and desperate. Mike, are you awake? He whispered into the phone. Yeah, I'm awake, Rodriguez replied. I can't stop thinking about tomorrow. What are we going to do? Maybe we should call in sick, Williams suggested. Or better yet, maybe we should just quit before he fires us. Rodriguez sat up in bed and rubbed his tired eyes. Running away won't solve anything. Besides, if we quit now, it'll look even worse. Like we're admitting we did something wrong. We did do something wrong, Williams shot back. We harassed our future boss and then lied about it in our report. How much worse can this get? The next morning came too quickly. Rodriguez and Williams met in the parking lot outside the police station at 7:30. They both looked terrible. Williams had dark circles under his eyes, and Rodriguez's uniform was wrinkled because his hands had been shaking while he tried to iron it. Maybe he'll be understanding, Rodriguez said hopefully. Maybe he'll give us another chance. Williams laughed bitterly. Would you give us another chance if you were him? We treated him like garbage, and then covered it up. I'd fire us on the spot. They walked into the station together, feeling like condemned men heading to their execution. Other officers greeted them, normally not knowing what was about to happen. Rodriguez and Williams tried to act casual, but everyone could tell something was wrong. At exactly 8 o'clock, they knocked on Commissioner Thompson's office door. Come in, came the calm voice from inside. Marcus was sitting behind his desk reading through a thick file. He was wearing his uniform with all the proper insignia and medals. The office had been redecorated since the previous commissioner left. There were certificates on the walls and pictures of Marcus receiving awards and commendations. "Sit down," Marcus said without looking up from the file. He continued reading for another full minute while Rodriguez and Williams squirmed in their chairs. The silence felt like it lasted forever. Finally, Marcus closed the file and looked directly at them. "I've been reviewing your service records," he said quietly. 18 complaints against Officer Rodriguez, 15 against Officer Williams, most dismissed without proper investigation. Rodriguez tried to speak, but Marcus held up his hand for silence. "I've also read the report you filed about our encounter 2 nights ago," Marcus continued. "According to this document, I was acting suspiciously. I became aggressive and uncooperative. I raised my voice at you." Williams stared at his hands, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. "Now I want you to tell me," Marcus said, leaning forward in his chair, "which version is true? The one where I was a well-dressed businessman, showing you proper identification and explaining that I owned my vehicle, or the one where I was a suspicious character causing trouble in your district?" Rodriguez's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He wanted to lie again, but he could see in Marcus's eyes that there was no point. The truth was already known. Sir Rodriguez finally managed to say, "We may have misunderstood the situation." "Misunderstood," Marcus repeated slowly. "You misunderstood when I showed you my registration. You misunderstood when I gave you my insurance papers. You misunderstood when I calmly answered all your questions and followed all your instructions." Williams found his voice. "Commissioner, we were just doing our job. Sometimes these situations get confusing and—" Marcus cut him off. "Officer Williams, your job is to protect and serve all citizens. Your job is to treat people with respect and dignity. Your job is to write honest, accurate reports about your interactions with the public." He opened the file again and pulled out several documents. "These are other complaints filed against both of you. Mrs. Johnson, a 60-year-old teacher who was searched at a traffic stop for no reason. Miguel Gonzalez, a college student who was arrested for walking in his own neighborhood. The Patterson family, who were pulled over 3 times in 1 month." Rodriguez felt sick to his stomach. He had forgotten about some of those incidents. They had seemed unimportant at the time. "Each of these reports was dismissed," Marcus continued. "Each complainant was told there was insufficient evidence. Each case was closed without real investigation. Do you see a pattern here?" Both officers nodded miserably. Marcus stood up and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. "I started my career as a beat cop 20 years ago," he said. "I know how hard this job can be. I know the pressures you face and the split-second decisions you have to make." He turned back to face them. "But I also know the difference between good policing and bad policing. I know the difference between protecting citizens and abusing them. And I definitely know the difference between honest reports and lies designed to cover up misconduct." Rodriguez finally broke down. "Commissioner, we're sorry," he said with tears in his eyes. "We made a mistake. A big mistake. Please give us another chance." Marcus sat back down and looked at both men carefully. "Your apology is noted," he said, "but sorry doesn't undo the damage you've caused to the department's reputation or to the people you've mistreated." Williams was crying now too. "Sir, please," he begged. "I have a family. I have kids. This job is all I know." Marcus's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "Officer Williams, I have a family too. I also have a responsibility to every citizen in this city to ensure they're treated fairly by police officers." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out 2 official-looking documents. "I'm placing both of you on administrative leave effective immediately. You'll surrender your badges and weapons. A full investigation will be conducted into your actions and the reports you filed." Rodriguez and Williams sat in stunned silence. They had known this was coming, but hearing it made it real. "The investigation will be thorough and fair," Marcus continued. "If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to worry about. But if the investigation finds evidence of misconduct or false reporting, you'll face the appropriate consequences." Both officers slowly removed their badges and placed them on Marcus's desk. They unholstered their weapons and set them down as well. 20 years of police work reduced to pieces of metal on a desk. "Report to Internal Affairs at 10 o'clock, Marcus said. They'll explain the investigation process and your rights. Until this matter is resolved, you're not to enter any police facilities or identify yourselves as police officers." Rodriguez and Williams stood up shakily. They looked at Marcus one last time, hoping to see some sign of mercy or understanding. Instead, they saw the steady gaze of a man who believed in justice above all else. As they walked toward the door, Marcus called after them, "Officers, this could have been avoided if you had simply treated me with the same respect you'd want for your own families." The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like the end of their careers. The Internal Affairs Office was located in the basement of the police headquarters. The walls were painted an ugly green color, and the fluorescent lights flickered constantly. Rodriguez and Williams sat on hard plastic chairs in the waiting area, feeling like criminals instead of police officers. Detective Sarah Chen from Internal Affairs finally called them into her office. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She had investigated hundreds of police misconduct cases over her 10-year career. "Gentleman," Detective Chen said as she opened a digital recorder, "this interview is being recorded. You have the right to have a union representative present. Do you understand your rights?" Both men nodded. Williams had called the police union lawyer that morning but was told it might be days before someone could meet with them. They were on their own for now. Detective Chen spread several files across her desk. "Let's start with the incident from 2 nights ago. Officer Rodriguez, you filed the initial report. Can you walk me through what happened?" Rodriguez told his version of events. He tried to stick to the false report, but Detective Chen kept asking specific questions that made his story fall apart. She wanted to know exact times, locations, and details that Rodriguez couldn't remember because they hadn't really happened. "Officer Williams, your turn," Detective Chen said after an hour of questioning Rodriguez. "Tell me about this suspicious behavior you observed." Williams started sweating immediately. He had never been good at lying, and under Detective Chen's intense questioning, he began contradicting both his partner and the written report. "So let me understand this," Detective Chen said after listening to both stories. "You two experienced officers felt threatened by a well-dressed man in an expensive business suit who politely showed you his identification and vehicle registration." "It sounds bad when you put it like that," Rodriguez admitted, "but you weren't there. You don't know how these situations can escalate." Detective Chen opened another file. "Actually, I do know. I've reviewed both of your disciplinary records. Officer Rodriguez, you've been accused of excessive force 6 times in the past 2 years. Officer Williams, you've had 4 complaints for inappropriate conduct during traffic stops." She pulled out more documents. "I've also spoken with several witnesses from the night in question. A woman in the office building across the street saw the entire encounter through her window. She recorded part of it on her cell phone." Rodriguez and Williams exchanged panicked looks. They had no idea anyone was watching that night. "The witness states that the subject you stopped was cooperative throughout the encounter," Detective Chen continued. "She observed him showing you documents and answering your questions. At no point did she see aggressive behavior from him." Williams slumped in his chair. "We're finished," he whispered to Rodriguez. Detective Chen spent the next 3 hours going through every detail of their careers. She had complaints, testimonies, and evidence that painted a clear picture of 2 officers who had abused their authority for years. During a break, Rodriguez called his wife from the hallway. "Honey," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I might be coming home early today. There's some trouble at work." "Is everything okay?" she asked with concern in her voice. "I don't know," Rodriguez replied honestly. "I really don't know." Back in the interview room, Detective Chen presented them with a choice. "You can continue to deny what happened and face formal charges for filing false reports, or you can admit the truth and cooperate with our investigation." Williams broke first. "Okay," he said quietly. "We screwed up. The guy we stopped wasn't doing anything wrong. We hassled him because we thought he didn't belong in that neighborhood." Rodriguez glared at his partner, but knew it was over. Detective Chen had too much evidence and too many witnesses. "Fine," he said angrily. "We made a mistake. Are you happy now?" "This isn't about happiness," Detective Chen replied calmly. "This is about accountability. You're sworn officers who took an oath to protect and serve all citizens equally." The formal interview concluded at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Detective Chen informed them that her investigation would continue for several more weeks. She would be interviewing other officers, reviewing body camera footage, and examining their entire careers with the department. As Rodriguez and Williams left the building, they felt like different people than when they had arrived that morning. Their confidence was gone. Their sense of invincibility had disappeared. For the first time in their careers, they were being held accountable for their actions. Commissioner Thompson spent the day meeting with other department heads and reviewing policies. He knew that changing the culture of the police force would take time and effort. Rodriguez and Williams were just the beginning. He called a meeting with all supervisors for the next morning. Sergeant Paula Davis would be there along with several lieutenants and captains. Marcus had plans for all of them. The investigation into Rodriguez and Williams quickly became the talk of the entire police department. Some officers were shocked that two of their colleagues were being held accountable. Others whispered that it was about time someone cleaned house. Marcus also met with community leaders that afternoon. He wanted their input on how to rebuild trust between police and citizens. Many were skeptical after years of broken promises, but they appreciated being asked for their opinions. Pastor Williams from the Eastside Baptist Church told Marcus about the dozens of young men in his congregation who had been stopped by police for no reason. Mr. Garcia from the Latino Community Center shared stories of families afraid to call police even when they needed help. "This is exactly why I took this job," Marcus told them. "Every citizen deserves to feel safe and protected by their police force." As evening approached, Marcus drove through the neighborhoods that Rodriguez and Williams had patrolled. He saw groups of young people hanging out on street corners, single mothers walking home from late shifts, elderly residents sitting on their porches. These were the people Rodriguez and Williams had sworn to protect. Instead, they had terrorized and harassed them. Marcus was determined to make sure that never happened again. Meanwhile, Rodriguez and Williams were at home trying to explain to their families what was happening. Rodriguez's wife was angry and confused. Williams's children asked why Daddy wasn't wearing his police uniform anymore. Both men realized their world had completely changed in just 2 days. They had thought their badges made them untouchable. They had believed the system would always protect them. Now they were learning that everyone faces consequences for their actions eventually. The investigation was just beginning, but the message was already clear. Commissioner Marcus Thompson was serious about reform. Officers who abused their power would be held accountable. The days of covering up misconduct were over. Change was coming to the police department whether people liked it or not. And it all started with 2 officers who made the mistake of thinking they were above the law. Detective Chen worked late into the night reviewing evidence and preparing her investigation report. The case against Rodriguez and Williams was becoming stronger by the hour. She had body camera footage from other incidents, witness statements, and a pattern of behavior that stretched back years. Commissioner Thompson had given her unlimited resources and full authority to conduct a thorough investigation. This was unusual. Most police misconduct cases were handled quietly with minimal investigation, but Marcus wanted everything done properly and transparently. The next morning, Detective Chen met with Marcus in his office to provide an update. She spread photographs, documents, and video stills across his desk. "Commissioner, what I found is disturbing," Detective Chen said. "These 2 officers have been operating without proper oversight for years. Their supervisor, Sergeant Davis, has been rubber stamping their reports without reading them." Marcus studied the evidence carefully. "Show me the pattern," he said. Detective Chen pulled out a map of the city with colored pins marking different incidents. The red pins represent excessive force complaints. The blue pins are racial profiling allegations. The yellow pins are false arrest cases. Almost all the pins were clustered in the same neighborhoods where Rodriguez and Williams patrolled. The pattern was unmistakable. They had been targeting specific communities for years. "Have you interviewed the other officers in their unit?" Marcus asked. "Yes, sir," Detective Chen replied. Most are afraid to speak openly, but a few have come forward. Officer Janet Martinez told me she witnessed Rodriguez roughing up a teenager last month. Officer David Kim said Williams made racist comments during their shifts together. Marcus felt angry but kept his voice calm. What about Sergeant Davis? What's her involvement in all this? Detective Chen opened another file. Sergeant Davis has been their supervisor for 3 years. During that time, she received 42 complaints about officers under her command. She dismissed 40 of them without investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Rodriguez and Williams hadn't been acting alone. They had been protected by a system that enabled misconduct and punished those who spoke out against it. Detective Chen continued her briefing. I've also discovered that Rodriguez and Williams have been coaching other officers on how to write reports that justify their actions. They created a culture where harassment was normalized. Marcus walked to his window and looked out at the city he had sworn to protect. How did we let it get this bad? He said, more to himself than to Detective Chen. Sir, if I may, Detective Chen said carefully, this didn't happen overnight. Years of poor leadership allowed these problems to grow. The previous commissioner focused more on politics than policing. Marcus turned back to face her. What do you recommend as next steps? Detective Chen had prepared for this question. I recommend formal charges against Rodriguez and Williams for filing false reports, misconduct, and violation of civil rights. I also recommend a complete review of Sergeant Davis's decisions over the past 3 years, and the other officers who were involved. Some should face disciplinary action. Others just need retraining and better supervision. But first, we need to change the culture that made this behavior acceptable. Marcus nodded approvingly. Detective Chen had done excellent work. Her investigation would serve as the foundation for broader reforms throughout the department. That afternoon, Marcus called a meeting with the police union president, Frank Morrison. The union would likely fight any major changes, but Marcus needed their cooperation to make lasting reforms. Morrison arrived with 2 other union officials and a lawyer. They looked prepared for a fight. Marcus offered them coffee and tried to keep the atmosphere friendly. Frank Marcus began, I know this investigation has the union concerned. I want to assure you that I'm not conducting a witch hunt against good officers. Commissioner Morrison replied stiffly, we're worried about the precedent this sets. Every officer could become a target for false accusations if we start believing complainants over sworn officers. Marcus had expected this response. Frank, I understand your concern for officer safety and due process, but I also have a responsibility to ensure public trust in our department. He showed Morrison some of the evidence Detective Chen had compiled. Look at these statistics. Complaints against officers in this district are 3 times higher than the city average. Citizen satisfaction surveys show this area has the lowest trust in police. Morrison looked uncomfortable as he reviewed the data. These numbers are concerning, he admitted, but that doesn't mean Rodriguez and Williams are guilty of wrongdoing. Frank Marcus said, leaning forward, these officers harassed their future commissioner and then filed a false report about it. If they did that to me, imagine what they've done to ordinary citizens who have no voice or power. The union lawyer spoke up. Commissioner will need to see all evidence before we can comment on specific cases. Our members deserve fair representation. Of course, Marcus agreed. I want everything to be transparent and above board. But I also want you to understand that protecting bad officers hurts good officers. When citizens don't trust police, everyone's job becomes harder. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Commissioner, what exactly are you proposing? Marcus outlined his vision for reform. Better training, stronger oversight, community engagement, and real consequences for misconduct. He also promised to support good officers with better equipment, resources, and career development opportunities. We're not enemies, Frank Marcus said. We both want the same thing. A police force that serves the community effectively and honorably. Morrison seemed genuinely interested in some of Marcus's proposals, but he also warned that the union would fight any attempt to punish officers without proper due process. After the meeting, Marcus felt cautiously optimistic. Morrison was more reasonable than he had expected. With the union's cooperation, real change would be possible. Meanwhile, Rodriguez and Williams were at home facing the reality of their situation. Their lawyer had reviewed Detective Chen's evidence and told them their position was hopeless. "She has everything," Williams said to Rodriguez during a phone call. "Witnesses, video evidence, testimony from other officers. We're finished." Rodriguez was drinking his fourth beer of the day. "Maybe we should have treated people better over the years," he said bitterly. "Maybe we should have remembered we're supposed to be the good guys." Williams laughed without humor. "Remember when we thought that badge made us untouchable? Turns out it just made us targets." The investigation continued for another week. Detective Chen interviewed dozens of witnesses, reviewed hundreds of reports, and built an airtight case. Other officers in the department watched nervously, wondering if they would be next. Marcus used the investigation as an opportunity to send a message to everyone in the department. Standards would be enforced. Accountability was not optional. The culture of protecting bad officers was over. Some officers welcomed the changes. They had been frustrated for years watching colleagues get away with behavior that made their jobs harder. Finally, they had a leader who cared more about doing right than looking good. Others resisted. They had benefited from the old system where complaints were ignored and misconduct was covered up. These officers would need to change or find new careers. Detective Chen finally completed her investigation 3 weeks after it began. Her report was comprehensive, damning, and undeniable. Rodriguez and Williams would face criminal charges. Sergeant Davis would be demoted and required to undergo extensive retraining. But the investigation was just the beginning. Real reform would take months or years. Marcus was prepared for that challenge. He had learned that change comes slowly in police departments, but it was possible with the right leadership and commitment. The badge that Rodriguez and Williams had thought made them untouchable had instead become the symbol of their downfall. They had forgotten that with power comes responsibility, and with authority comes accountability. Marcus Thompson was determined to make sure no other officers forgot those lessons. The work of rebuilding trust between police and community was just beginning. 6 months had passed since Detective Chen completed her investigation. The formal criminal charges against Rodriguez and Williams were filed in district court. The local newspaper had picked up the story, and it became front-page news for several weeks. Rodriguez sat in his lawyer's office reviewing a plea agreement. His attorney, a tired-looking man named Harold Fisher, had handled dozens of police misconduct cases. He didn't have good news. Mike Fisher said bluntly, "You need to accept this deal. The prosecutor has video evidence, witness testimony, and your own partner's confession. If you go to trial, you'll get the maximum sentence." The plea deal would mean Rodriguez would lose his job permanently, face probation, and pay substantial fines. But he would avoid jail time. He looked at the papers, feeling defeated. "What about my pension?" Rodriguez asked weakly. "Gone," Fisher replied. "You'll lose all benefits when you're terminated for cause. 20 years of service down the drain." Meanwhile, Williams had already accepted a similar plea agreement. He was working as a security guard at a shopping mall, making minimum wage. His wife had taken the children and moved back to her mother's house. His life had completely fallen apart. Commissioner Thompson stood before the city council presenting his comprehensive police reform plan. The council chambers were packed with community members, police officers, and media representatives. Everyone wanted to hear how things would change. Council members, Marcus began, "Over the past 6 months, we've implemented significant reforms in our police department. I'm here today to request funding for expanded training programs, community oversight, and improved officer wellness support." Councilwoman Rodriguez, who represented the district where the incident occurred, was the first to speak. "Commissioner Thompson, your changes have been impressive. Complaints against officers are down 30%, and community satisfaction surveys show marked improvement." Marcus nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Councilwoman. But we still have work to do. Real change takes time and sustained effort. We can't allow ourselves to become complacent." The council unanimously approved funding for Marcus's reform initiatives. The vote was seen as a strong endorsement of his leadership and vision for the department. Sergeant Paula Davis, now Captain Davis after completing an intensive leadership program, was implementing new oversight procedures in her unit. She had initially resented being demoted, but came to appreciate the opportunity to learn better management skills. Davis met with her new team of supervisors to review weekly complaint reports. Every allegation was now investigated thoroughly and documented properly. Officers knew their actions would be scrutinized carefully. "We have zero tolerance for misconduct," Davis told her team. "But we also support officers who do their jobs professionally and respectfully. It's our responsibility to help them succeed." Officer Janet Martins, who had testified during the investigation, was promoted to training coordinator. She developed new programs focused on community policing, de-escalation techniques, and cultural sensitivity. Martinez often thought about Rodriguez and Williams. She had worked with them for 2 years and seen their behavior firsthand. She was glad they were gone, but sad that it had taken so long for someone to stop them. The community had also changed. Pastor Williams from the Eastside Baptist Church noticed that young people in his congregation were beginning to trust police again. They still had concerns, but they felt someone was finally listening to them. Mr. Garcia from the Latino Community Center worked with Marcus to establish regular meetings between police and community leaders. These sessions helped build understanding and address problems before they escalated. Marcus received a letter one day that touched him deeply. It was from Mrs. Johnson, the elderly teacher who had been inappropriately searched by Rodriguez during a traffic stop 3 years earlier. "Commissioner Thompson," she wrote, "I never thought anyone would believe my story about what happened to me. Thank you for showing that police officers can be held accountable. You've given me back my faith in the system." The letter reminded Marcus why he had taken this difficult job. It wasn't about revenge against Rodriguez and Williams. It was about ensuring that every citizen could trust the police to treat them fairly. Rodriguez struggled to find new employment. His termination from the police force was public record, and most security companies wouldn't hire him. He eventually got a job at a construction site doing manual labor. His wife divorced him 6 months after he lost his job. She couldn't handle the shame and financial stress. Rodriguez moved into a small apartment and barely made enough money to pay child support. Williams had similar struggles. The shopping mall fired him after 3 months when they discovered his background. He worked a series of temporary jobs, never staying anywhere long enough to build stability. Both men had time to think about their choices. They realized they had hurt many innocent people during their careers. The power they thought their badges gave them had ultimately destroyed their lives. Detective Chen received a commendation for her thorough investigation. She was promoted to lieutenant and put in charge of expanding the Internal Affairs Division. Her work had become the model for investigating police misconduct throughout the state. Marcus implemented a citizen review board with real authority to investigate complaints and recommend discipline. The board included community leaders, retired judges, and former police officers who understood both sides of police-citizen interactions. The new systems weren't perfect, but they were a dramatic improvement over the old ways. Officers knew they would be held accountable for their actions. Citizens knew their complaints would be taken seriously. Training for all officers now included extensive work on implicit bias, constitutional rights, and community relations. New recruits spent time in the neighborhoods they would patrol, learning about the people they would serve. Marcus also established a police officer wellness program. He understood that stress and burnout could contribute to poor decision-making. Officers had access to counseling, support groups, and mental health resources. The department's culture was slowly changing. Good officers felt supported and empowered. Those who couldn't adapt to the new standards found other careers. The hiring process was reformed to screen out candidates with troubling backgrounds or attitudes. Marcus often worked late into the evening reviewing reports and planning new initiatives. His wife Sarah would find him at his desk going over statistics and feedback from community meetings. "You're changing hearts and minds," she told him one night, "but don't forget to take care of yourself too." Marcus smiled and closed his laptop. "Change is hard work," he said, "but seeing the difference we're making keeps me motivated." The transformation wasn't complete, but the progress was undeniable. Police officers and community members were beginning to see each other as partners in public safety rather than adversaries. Rodriguez and Williams had thought their badges made them untouchable. Instead, their actions had triggered reforms that would prevent other officers from making the same mistakes. Marcus Thompson had turned a moment of personal humiliation into an opportunity for systemic change. The badge had become what it was always meant to be, a symbol of service protection and justice for all. 1 year later, Commissioner Marcus Thompson stood at the podium in the same briefing room where he had first been introduced to the department. The room looked different now. The walls were painted a warmer color, and there were photos showing officers working with community members. The officers sitting before him were different too. Some faces were the same, but their attitudes had changed. They sat straighter, paid attention, and showed genuine interest in what their leader had to say. Marcus looked out at the assembled group and smiled. When I first walked into this room, many of you didn't know what to expect. Some of you were skeptical about change. Others were worried about their futures. Officer Martinez raised her hand. "Commissioner, can I say something?" she asked. "Of course," Marcus replied. Martinez stood up and addressed her colleagues. "A year ago, I was afraid to speak up when I saw misconduct. I thought reporting bad behavior would make me a target. Now I know that staying silent was the real problem." Several officers nodded in agreement. The culture of silence that had protected Rodriguez and Williams was fading away. Officers were learning to hold each other accountable. Marcus continued his address. "The changes we've made aren't just about rules and policies. They're about remembering why we became police officers in the first place. We're here to serve and protect everyone in our community." Detective Chen, now Lieutenant Chen, was implementing new training programs across the state. Other police departments were studying their reforms and adopting similar policies. The changes in their district had become a model for law enforcement nationwide. Captain Davis had grown into her role as a leader. She met regularly with community groups and worked to build bridges between police and citizens. The promotion she had initially seen as a punishment had become the most rewarding part of her career. Davis often thought about the mistakes she had made supervising Rodriguez and Williams. She had failed in her duty to oversee officers properly, but Marcus had given her a second chance, and she was determined not to waste it. Rodriguez was working as a night janitor at an office building. The work was lonely and poorly paid, but it was steady employment. He had lost everything because of his poor choices as a police officer. He sometimes wondered what would have happened if he and Williams had treated Marcus with respect that night. Would they still have their careers? Would their families still be intact? The questions haunted him, but he knew the answers wouldn't change anything. Williams had moved to another state to start over. He worked at a factory and lived in a small apartment. His ex-wife rarely let him see his children. The shame of his actions followed him everywhere he went. Both men had learned that actions have consequences. They had abused their authority for years, thinking they were untouchable. In the end, their badges had become symbols of their downfall rather than protection. Marcus received an award from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People for his work in police reform. He stood before an audience of civil rights leaders and community activists, accepting the honor. "This award belongs to everyone who had the courage to speak up about police misconduct," Marcus said in his acceptance speech. "Change only happens when good people refuse to stay silent about injustice." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Many people in the room had been victims of police harassment themselves. They understood how difficult it was to transform law enforcement culture. Pastor Williams approached Marcus after the ceremony. "Commissioner," he said, "you've given our community hope. My young people aren't afraid to call police anymore when they need help." "That's the greatest reward I could ask for," Marcus replied. "Trust has to be earned every day. We can't take it for granted." The police department's community policing program had become highly successful. Officers spent time in schools, businesses, and neighborhoods building relationships with the people they served. Crime rates were down, and citizen satisfaction was at an all-time high. Officer Kim, who had testified about Williams's racist comments, was now a training instructor. He taught new recruits about cultural sensitivity and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Kim remembered his early years when officers like Rodriguez and Williams had made racist jokes and comments regularly. He had felt uncomfortable but hadn't known how to respond. Now the department had clear policies against such behavior. Marcus's wife, Sarah, often accompanied him to community events. She saw how much the job meant to him and how seriously he took his responsibilities. The long hours and stress were worth it when they saw the positive changes happening. The Citizen Review Board had investigated over 100 complaints in its first year. While most were found to be without merit, the board's existence sent a message that all allegations would be taken seriously. Officers knew their actions were being washed. Lieutenant Chen published a research paper about police misconduct investigations. Her work was cited by academics and policymakers across the country. She had become a nationally recognized expert on police accountability. The transformation hadn't been easy. Some officers had resisted the changes and left the department. A few vocal critics in the community said the reforms didn't go far enough. But progress was unmistakable. Marcus established an annual award for officers who demonstrated exceptional community service. The first recipient was Officer Martinez for her work with at-risk youth. She had helped dozens of young people stay out of trouble and build positive relationships with police. Rodriguez read about the award ceremony in the newspaper. The officer receiving recognition had once been his colleague. He felt a mixture of regret and jealousy. He could have had a legacy like that if he had made different choices. Williams heard about the police reforms from his brother, who still lived in the city. The brother told him how much things had changed and how respected Commissioner Thompson had become. Williams felt ashamed of his past behavior. Marcus often drove through the neighborhoods where Rodriguez and Williams had patrolled. He saw children playing safely in parks, teenagers walking home from school without fear, and families feeling secure in their communities. The badge that Rodriguez and Williams had thought made them untouchable had ultimately led to their destruction. But for the officers who remained, it had regained its true meaning as a symbol of service and protection. Marcus kept a photo on his desk from the night he had been stopped by Rodriguez and Williams. It reminded him daily why his work was important. No citizen should ever be treated with disrespect by the people sworn to protect them. As he prepared to leave his office late one evening, Marcus reflected on the past year. The changes had been significant, but there was still work to do. Building trust was an ongoing process that required constant attention and commitment. He turned off the lights and locked his office door. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to serve the community. But tonight he felt satisfied knowing that his department was truly living up to its motto to protect and serve. The transformation was complete, but the work continued. Everyday officers went out knowing they were accountable for their actions. Everyday citizens felt a little safer knowing someone cared about treating them fairly. Rodriguez and Williams had learned too late that no one is above the law. Marcus Thompson had learned that one person really can make a difference. The badge they had all worn meant different things to each of them, but its true meaning would always be service, justice, and protection for everyone.